For a platform called edX. If you've never been on edX, it's a really, really great platform, and I can say this from personal experience. We've actually created and employed a couple courses on edX. So please help me welcome to the stage Mr. John Schwartz. He's the head of business development for edX, and he's going to talk to us about the rise of digital classrooms. Let's give him a big round of applause.
So am I hitting this one? This one?
Yeah, this is the forward.
Okay.
And the backward.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a good lunch. My name's John Schwartz, and I'm really honored to be back in the region. I've been coming here for the last 20 years. Since 1998 was my first visit to Dubai, and it's so amazing to see the changes every time I come back. And I was also fortunate enough to live here for 5 years when my children were very young. So anytime I can come back, especially to Dubai, and help support its learning and development, it's very special for me. Hisham did a great job, actually, of teeing me up for this presentation. In fact, he might have cut 8 minutes off my presentation as well. So thank you. You know, as I walk around the halls, it's pretty fascinating to see all the technological changes that are happening. I mean, we really are growing so much quicker than anybody thinks. I've just spent the last week talking to governments here in Abu Dhabi, in Kuwait, and everybody's talking about, geez, how fast everything's happening and how fast technology is changing the learning landscape and how we're going to solve, for what Hisham said, 85 million jobs that are going to go away. But what's interesting is that where we're seeing prolific changes in so many different areas, when it comes to education, and I'm going to take a far step back from what Hisham said, is that we're still kind of in the infancy, right? I mean, we're still really doing things in a very traditional way, and that's about to completely change. So what happens in 2030? 2030 is a momentous milestone in that 70% of the world's jobs will be obsolete. And that may even be a conservative number. 70%. How many hundreds of millions of jobs are going to go away? 75% of the workforce is going to be millennial. 25% of the workforce is going to be aging baby boomers that clearly are not going to have enough time to take their experience and what they've learned and pass it down to the current generation of learners. So IBM is one of our content providers on the edX platform, and also one of the users. And I stole this slide. I think this is amazing. Think about this. In the early 1980s, Buckminster Fuller observed that until 1900, human knowledge doubled every century. So every 100 years, technology changed. By the end of World War II, 1945, it was doubling every 25 years. So it cut 75 years off. Today, knowledge doubles almost every year. And I know we're all feeling that. You certainly feel it when you're at a tech conference like GITEX. But IBM took another step, and I think they're pretty well qualified to make this guesstimate, that knowledge could double every 12 hours. So if knowledge doubles every 12 hours, what does that do to our workforce? It means they have to constantly, as we just heard, become lifelong learners. And we're really going to have a number of very high-tech platforms that are user-intuitive, that are going to allow governments, NGOs, not-for-profits, enterprises to make those changes so they have the competencies that not only are they going to need to survive, but the organizations that they work for. I mean, this is taking a far step back, but just to keep it, you know, on a very plain level, look at what's happened in transportation with Uber and Lyft. You know, you used to hail taxis, now you can be the taxi. You know, it's become very progressive. You can download any movie you want, pretty much, from a number of different providers 24/7. Hotels, we all stay at hotels globally, but now your weekend residence, your permanent residence can become a hotel as well. But learning, and this picture should look familiar to most of us in this room, this is still kind of what it looks like. Even if you're sitting in Harvard or MIT, which was the founders of edX, if you go back 100 years, I bet maybe the dress is a little bit different and the haircuts, but this is traditionally, and continues to be to this day, obviously in universities and in some enterprise settings, the way people are learning. But the good news is that if you think about the 75% of millennials, which will be essentially running the world, they're comfortable in the digital age. This is how they grew up. This is all they know. As long as they have a smartphone or a computer, they can interact with other people. This is comfortable for them. Because when I talk to different enterprises, when I've talked to the governments here, everybody's concerned, how are we going to make this transition? The transition will be made much easier because your learners are comfortable with the technology that exists. So edX is an interesting platform. So edX was founded in 2012 by the #1 university in the world, MIT, and co-founded with Harvard University. And they had a very specific mission. #1, offer the best content through the best use of technology to achieve the best learning outcomes. So the content that for 300 years was for a very elite few was now being made for free to hundreds of millions of learners that either had no access or very little access. True story, and this only goes back 6 years ago. Our founder, Anant Agarwal, who's a 25-year tenured professor at MIT, and MIT considers itself pretty progressive, when he tried to get other professors to build the first MOOC, massive open online course, he couldn't get one professor. This is 6 years ago. Could not get anybody else to support him because nobody believed in this digital revolution in online learning. This is 6 years ago. He built the first course in his basement, literally in his basement with one light. You can hear dogs barking in the background, and he built a course that he's taught for 25 years to all incoming freshmen, circuits and electronics. And here was the goal. The goal was to get 2,500 people. That's a lot of people 6 years ago in very nascent new technology. 2,500. In the first day he launched it on the edX platform, 50,000 people signed up for it. 50,000. Yeah, thank you. But it gets better. By the end of the first week, end of the 7 days from when he launched this, again, homemade in his basement, 250,000 learners. It's unbelievable. So you can see the scalability, and while everybody seems to be scrambling for a solution, there are excellent solutions out there. You just heard a good one with Udacity and what we're trying to solve for. So right now, we actually have, to date, over 21 million learners, and we're in our infancy. In 3 years, we should have 300 million learners. And I truly believe that because the only way we can keep up with AI, with automation and technology in general, is through digital. And I'll be the first one to say it doesn't have to be ours, because there's plenty of room, but it's going to be done digitally. And you have to get comfortable with it now. So we have over 1,900 courses, and 140 of the top universities around the world, and we'll have our first Arab university launching in November. We actually have 50 million current course enrollments. It's taking off. 2 years ago, I couldn't get an enterprise to even integrate into our platform for free. This is coming from MIT and Harvard. 2 years ago, when we started Enterprise. So now we've become this worldwide movement. We absolutely, and we use this catchphrase a lot, but lifelong learning, it's not only a good thing, it's imperative. If you are not a lifelong learner and you need to work for a living, or even survive in this society with all the great things that you see in all the halls, you have to be a lifelong learner and you have to be comfortable on a digital platform. You know, one of the interesting things about edX being the only not-for-profit is that our technology is open source. So anybody in this room that wants a free platform that we've spent millions of dollars on can use our technology for free. And you can build your own courses. Those courses can be proprietary for your organization, or you can build those courses and offer them to the world. That's the give back. Everybody should have access for free to learn from the best institutions that are out there. One of the great things about an MIT-led program is that with all the algorithms and bots and all the great technology, literally every day, 24/7, we scour the globe for every open job position and every resume posting. And we aggregate that data, which is a lot of data, and we figure out where we should concentrate our efforts. In the old days, we just took good content. If you're Oxford University and you have a class in economics, we assumed it's good. But with the world changing, those same universities are saying, what does the world need? What does the UA need? What does the government need? And so all our focus is targeting on those key areas to try to keep up with the changes. And you all know, I don't do any audience participation, but I want to do this one because nobody's ever got the answer right. What do you think the #1 most in-demand job skill is now? And you can throw it out. 2.5 million unfilled jobs in this area. Close. Data science and AR. I'm going to tell you, cybersecurity. 2.5 million unfilled jobs. By 2021, 3.5 million unfilled jobs. That's a lot of unfilled jobs. So how are we going to fill these skills gaps? And how are we going to do it so it's cost effective, it's time efficient, and people can still work at their jobs? If you think about what a MicroMaster is, so MIT and Harvard, they came up with what's called a MicroMasters. It's a series of courses in a particular discipline, let's say supply chain from MIT, credit-backed by the university, and endorsed by at least 2 major Fortune 100 companies. So if you have employees, and every one of you in here that works at an organization is going to have this situation, where you have to take one employee and reskill him for another job so he stays viable, it'll be through a MicroMasters. And just to show you where this is going, you need no prerequisites to take a MicroMasters. It's roughly $1,000 US. It takes 6 to 8 months, and it's self-paced. But here's where I think it's interesting. If you decided after completing your MicroMasters in supply chain to complete your full master's degree from MIT and were accepted, you are halfway through a master's. Yet you did it completely online. So they're crediting you half. It only cost you $1,000 versus $45,000 on campus. And you saved a year of your time. This is where the world is and absolutely going. If you think about the slide that I showed you about IBM, think about our ability to double our knowledge base every 12 hours. Most of the leading organizations in the world, whether it's our platform or others, are using edX in some way. We're still, as far as I know, well, we're the only not-for-profit, but we're also the only platform where you can audit any of our courses from any of our universities, self-paced on your own time. The only difference is you don't get the verified certificate. So for a very nominal fee, which most enterprises want for their employees, you can get the verified certificate to show you have that competency from the university or from the enterprise. Like I said, IBM is a content provider on the platform, as is Microsoft and the Linux Foundation. It's a very elite top group of content providers to solve your needs. And what's so great about this opportunity, when I went to school, I had the ability in a 4-year degree to maybe pivot one time, meaning change my major. With online, you can experiment, you can try. All you need is an internet connection. And the difference is you're trying it from the best universities and institutions that offer that information. If I would have had this conversation with you at GITEX 10 years ago and said, look, you can take the same courses at Oxford that somebody who's paying $80,000 is taking, you would have said, never going to happen. It's here now. And people are taking advantage of it. And we know through, obviously, we're a very metric-driven organization, almost half the people say this has helped them professionally. The first thing any learner does when they get a verification, it's become digital currency. There's not an enterprise in the world that doesn't recognize the value of an edX verified certificate. It shows that organization that you successfully have that competency, and you can walk into the workplace and be viable. And this is why it's so disruptive, because traditional colleges, some, not all, aren't giving those competencies. And this is where the online really comes into play. The other thing which I get asked all the time is, well, is the learning as effective online? And I'm sure most of you in the room that are in the learning space and education, we all know it's even more effective than a talking head. I know I'm probably going to lose all of you in another 3 minutes unless I do something to completely snap you out of whatever you're doing. But because MIT has a neuroscience lab, every course that comes on the platform has a certain template to follow. Maybe it's 2 minutes of a lecturer, immediately followed by an assessment, because that's what your mind is sharpest. Or if I'm putting you to sleep, like I may be now, it's time to throw in a video. But what I think is interesting is that we can actually catalog and track every single keystroke of every single learner around the world. Can you imagine how many billions of keystrokes that is, considering we have 21 million people on the platform? But what that allows us to do, once we look at that data,